Hi guys, so today I wanted to share some of my thoughts on fakes and replicas in the fashion world. But first of all, let me thank you for 26 subscribers. That is 25 if I subtract my other account. It is kind of crazy to think that I just put out a few videos and then 25 people decided to just hang around and see what this girl comes up with next, because I couldn't fit 25 people into this room. I do plan on moving, so we'll just create more room for more people to hang out with. As for replicas and fakes in the fashion world, we have all heard of scandals where larger fashion retailers ripped off the designs of small independent brands or creators, or sometimes they straight up copied something from art projects or off of Etsy. But the reverse seems to be more common, where people make counterfeit products of luxury goods. And while that is absolutely illegal and those products can be seized by customs if you try to import them via mail or when you get back from vacation, many people seem to condone that or just look the other way when they see it happening. So let's see what this is all about. Now, when we hear about replicas of fakes, the first thing that comes to mind is just like cheaply made bad leather purses, usually with a fake Chanel logo on them, and that just reek of all the bad chemicals in the world, and that will definitely break down within 2 weeks of use. And there's also a very crucial health or environmental aspect that we need to look up. Low-wage countries do not have the same regulations as we have here in like Western developed countries. Even more benign materials such as cotton are actually quite devastating to the planet when they are produced. Most famous is the tragic fate of the Aral Lake in the Western Asian region. During the 1960s, the Soviet Union decided to reroute some of the rivers feeding into that lake to water cotton plants with, and that led to a drying of the lake. The water turned salty, fish died, and all the ports that were located around the lake suddenly were way into the countryside, and the communities around them became impoverished. Especially leather products are often tanned using hazardous chemicals that can often linger inside the material and then affect us as consumers as well. Now, the low-wage countries where some of those leather products are produced, they do not have the workers' safety regulation, so there are many terrible injuries and accidents happening there that I will not go into detail about. But one of the most common bad chemicals associated with leather is chromium-6. The chromium tanning process, that's a tongue breaker. Tongue breaker or twister? Tongue twister. It's a tongue breaker in German because we're violent like that. The chromium tanning process is one of the most common tanning processes for leather, but it is also quite a controversial one because, as I mentioned before, it can create chromium-6, and people who work with those leather products, they can develop illnesses of their respiratory tract. They can develop asthma, bronchitis, different cancers all over in their body, but especially around their airways, and there's also many skin conditions related to it. So not only is it unethical to buy leather that was tanned in such working conditions, but with such working conditions it is not a stretch to assume that those chemicals are then often leaked into the environment, and the communities affected by those leaks of wastewaters are often riddled by illness or disabilities following the long-term pollution of their environment. And this can also have an impact on Western consumers, as some people may develop a contact allergy when being exposed to leather that was contaminated by chromium-6. If you've been in contact with leather materials and you find that you always get a bit of a rash around it, it may be that. And in that case, you should first take to a doctor to confirm an allergy, and then you can also contact some consumer protection agencies that can then do tests or warn others about those materials. You could also think of contacting the manufacturer, but especially if it's been a cheap good, maybe a fake one that you imported from the third world, so to say, then your chances of getting anything or getting them to change their ways are probably quite slim. What I'm about to mention goes for many legally acquired products as well, but it is a topic that is very dear to me as a fashion worker in Europe myself, and that is the ethics of production. All of us have heard about sweatshops and the push towards sweatshop-free labor or fair trade. But even if those standards are met, it doesn't mean that the production has been entirely ethical. There are low-wage countries where it's perfectly legal for workers to be uninsured or underinsured. They may not have unions to fight for their rights and very little access to healthcare for any accidents they may have if they suffer repetitive stress injuries on their body or develop allergies. It seems kind of obvious that production can only be ethical when people earn a living wage, when they can be healthy at their workplace and at home, and when they aren't just one accident or one pulmonary infection away from slipping into poverty. That is something I try to remain very conscious of, and something that goes for many legally acquired products, as I just said. But it is also something that we should really keep in mind when we want to buy counterfeits or rip-offs. But that poses the question, is every counterfeit product automatically extremely bad and unethically made? Well, not really. There are actually many high-quality replicas on the market, and those seem to stem from companies that already produce through third-party factories. Now, this is what we in the industry call working the fourth day shift, because, you know, there's only 3 8-hour shifts in a day, and that is, so to say, the fourth one. It can be accomplished through just removing a few materials and a bit of manpower from the main production and just making your little fake business on the side. Or it could just be a different type of crossover between the real production and the fake one, or simply a fake one that's gotten really good because they saw the market changed. Now, there's a very interesting case study, and I'd like to point to a different YouTuber at this point, who is Ben Arthur. He bought several fake Daniel Wellington watches and compared them to each other, and while some were obviously fake and of low quality, there was one that was surprisingly similar to the real one. All the teeny tiny differences he spotted between the watches could just be due to them being from a different batch. Everything else was identical, even inside the watch. Now, the aforementioned watch brand is not really known to be of high quality. It is not really sought after on the watch market. So one could speculate that this is a case of third-party factories where there's really a parallel production going on to the real thing. But it is something that also sparks a conversation on the actual cost of producing a good. Because when you compare a £20 Daniel Wellington watch to the real one at £170 or so, I think, that kind of poses the question if the real one doesn't just have a £150 profit margin. But that's not really the case. Now, even if we assume very low labor costs and material prices in our price calculation, the original company has many costs that the fake brand doesn't have. Such as development costs, reaching from designs to samplings to just making more collections, trying different materials. If we assume that both watches were made in the same area, the fake brand may also have a huge advantage in sourcing materials. They do not have to approach suppliers and get quotes about the materials. They may just go to what the real brand uses. Then there's also the insane costs of marketing in general, such as advertising to consumers, advertising to potential resellers, to suppliers. They need to do the social media concept, the online shop, and potential pop-up stores, while all maintaining their brand identity and making sure everything is in line with everything else the brand does. They have to factor in markups for resellers, and they may have to run customer service hotlines and stuff like that. And all the employees who work in development, in marketing, in HR, and so on, are often located in high-wage countries. We're talking about completely different proportions on that side of the product. In those departments, the manufacturers of fake products are essentially stealing our manpower in marketing and other areas. And the thing is, in high-wage countries, the amount of employers in the textile industry who employ more than, let's say, 10 or more than 50 people even, has gone down dramatically. Most of the companies left are single-person companies, or they employ less than 10 people, so it is essentially important that we protect the few larger players that we have left. And it is also worth noting that with so few employers in the textile industry, people who would technically become jobless if one of them were to go bankrupt, then really have difficulties finding a new job. And especially jobs in marketing or product development are what is the middle class, and that is already being thinned out. So we also need to look at how we can protect our own economy and our own neighbors, so to say, by making the right choices when buying. Even if it's only those jobs and not too many in manufacturing, it is still worth protecting those jobs. So to say that everything between a fake product and the real one is just profit margin isn't true. It absolutely isn't. But with luxury fashion being so expensive due to using labor from the Western world, isn't fakes and replicas just a way for poorer people to gain access to the luxury market? Well, since we're here on the internet and I have standards to live up to, let me just throw out a controversial statement before explaining what I mean by it, okay? The thing is that low-income people aren't entitled to luxury goods. It is not a human right. Let me explain, okay? Now, what I'm convinced is a human right is access to well-fitting protective clothing. It is access to clothing that helps with integration into society so that you do not get stigmatized, and by that I mean suits for the workplace, school uniforms, sports clothes, or just uniforms for leisure time activities. A Chanel bag doesn't fall into that category, nor do Rolexes, Yeezys, or that 33rd pair of shoes you just that I just bought. I'm sorry, I'm projecting. I would like to point out that these things I say are human rights still aren't met today. There are people who are being stigmatized because of what they wear. One just can't network their way up when they do not have the proper clothes to get into that event. And some people may develop long-term health conditions from not wearing proper shoes, or not wearing any at all, or are constantly freezing in winter. And even when those needs are met, it is often only through cheap clothing that was manufactured under precarious conditions, and that often doesn't last for very long and could potentially be unsafe for the consumer. And now I would also like to make a point as to how condoning knockoffs actually has a lot of potential to harm smaller players. In the last few years, many large designers were outed as having stolen from smaller creators or having exploited independent designers, and rightfully so. Some of those instances seemed like a clear-cut case of theft, while others are a bit more nuanced, but in all instances it is not right to steal intellectual property. And in all honesty, an Etsy shop creator or a small indigenous people wouldn't slap those large corporations with all the licensing laws there are. Even if taking advantage of that probably isn't right either, but you could bring them on board, work with them, they profit off the work, and you could still make your millions and billions. It would literally be that easy to work with people who are at the bottom of the food chain, so to say. I just want to say that it could be done in a much less bad way. And we could actually advance creativity and development all over the globe, and we could all work together. From my perspective, it seems as though people tend to look the other way when it's a smaller player making counterfeits from a large, successful brands. It's almost like it's considered to be a Robin Hood type of concept, to like take from the rich and give it to the poor through the means of a third party making counterfeits. But if we continue along this train of thought, it can actually send us down a slippery slope. This could actually set a precedent for larger corporations to rip off the smallers. And it won't stop at saying, okay, that one player can rip off the other one, but not vice versa, that won't work out. So it would be a bit of a legal loophole to just tolerate importing fake products and not seizing them at customs anymore. If we really want to help the poorer, low-income side of the population, but also the middle class, we should push for a more constitutional type of change and also mend loopholes, not create them. I hope that this video made you either reconsider or maybe it reinforced your stance on replicas and fakes. But most importantly, I also wanted to invite everyone to look at the bigger picture of what it means when goods are cheaply produced. We've often grown accustomed to the idea that cheap labor is necessary for us to be able to dress appropriately. In that, we often neglect the fact that our purchasing options have been reshaped by huge advertisers and also companies who produce in third world countries. This wasn't really the case until 50 or 60 years ago. Asking for high quality clothing that can be worn for several years, that the manufacturers did not have to suffer for, isn't a radical idea. So it turns out I'm the type of person who just randomly wanders off filming a video and then never comes back again. I don't know. As I'm now editing this a few days later, I realize that there's quite a few interesting perspectives to that subject that I didn't touch upon. So I'll probably follow this up with a longer version of everything combined. So if you like this, please stay tuned for another video of this kind, and if you didn't like it, maybe give me another chance to do it properly. Either way, thanks a lot for watching. Let me know what you think in the comments below, and see you soon. Bye! I feel like the same damn fly that was in my room a few weeks ago is still here. How is that possible? Where is it? I can't find it. It'll come when I'm back to filming. Okay, well, anyways, there's a fly in the room. Riddled by illness? Can you be riddled by illness? I hope you can. Shit. That's what freestyling a YouTube video brings you. Riddled. Riled. Riddled. Riddled with anxiety, riddled with bullets. Hope that works.